and welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our conversations this morning with some candidates for the upcoming April 28th general elections. And we are chatting now with the Tobago West candidate for the Innovative Democratic Alliance, and that's none other than Ms. Kaye Trotman. So good morning and welcome to you, Ms. Trotman. How are you doing?
I am doing quite fine. Good morning, Kandace, and good morning to the rest of Tobago viewing wherever you're viewing from.
Now, you've been around in this space for quite a while as one of the tourism stakeholders, especially where the bed and breakfast and guest houses are concerned, leading those organizations and so on. But now you're stepping out more in the political space. You've chosen to be a candidate or to put yourself forward to be a candidate for the Tobago West seat. Tell us why.
I believe a new opportunity has presented itself to us in the country, not just Tobago, but Trinidad and Tobago. And that at this point in time, we need all those who find themselves in leadership position to really see how they can consciously and deliberately contribute to the development and the progress of Tobago, bringing all the skills and leadership technicalities into the fray. And because I've been with the smaller properties and I have seen some of the headaches that we have had to at least grow that sector, it was an ideal opportunity to step forward even further. I know this is not my first time in the political fray.
No,
I was there at the last THA election, and I stuck with it because I believe that we could do something, and it's not enough to just talk about what's wrong, but when we find things that are wrong, we need to step forward and actually be the change we need to see.
So now you are planning to take this fight to the parliament.
Yes.
How do you see your position in parliament being influential, let's say starting with tourism, and especially, as you mentioned, the smaller places, the smaller accommodation, the guest houses, the bed and breakfast. How do you see your role as an MP impacting the way those places are able to operate here in Tobago?
Well, let me pull it back from just being specific to the smaller properties and to looking at a wider scale. The role of an MP, and especially I would like to put some criteria on that. The role of an MP, especially an MP that is not aligned to a national party in Trinidad, presents Tobago with a significant leveraging power. A leveraging power that Tobago's issues can truly be articulated in Parliament without any guardrails, so to speak, that limits what can be said. So that my position as an MP with the IDA is to provide an opportunity for Tobago's voice to be truly heard and its issues to be discussed without it being tailored to a party agenda. And that, I believe, is a leveraging power because it allows Tobago to have a say in where the laws that are being made, that it takes into consideration Tobago's unique position. So a law like the property tax would never have occurred to the extent that properties that are on the beachfront are in a higher tax rate, bearing in mind that Tobago has a lot of fishing villages with properties that are on the beachfront that are not necessarily luxury resort properties, but are properties for the average Tobagonian. And why should they be disadvantaged because we happen to be in a small fishing village? Beachfront properties, therefore, needs to be redefined from a Tobago perspective. We didn't hear that discussion coming out from our existing MPs. It would allow us to also have a say in how the budget is shaped. So I know we have been clamoring for years, 4.03 is not enough. And it's usually rubber stamped by the two MPs that are there because they do not go against the party's direction there. But when you do have two independent thinking, unbiased, unaffiliated Tobago candidates, then they can now truly articulate a proper percentage or proper formulation for what Tobago's budget should be until we get further DRC type changes. And that means the two seats will definitely be critical to any laws, any budget allocations going forward, and even to unbiased oversight of the cabinet in its function. So people should not wonder what we are bringing to the table. We are bringing leverage and power for Tobago.
Are you at all worried? Because there's some people that are criticizing most of the parties that are contesting here in Tobago, saying that those 2 seats, it's not enough when it's compared to the 39 seats in Trinidad to make a difference. How would you refute this argument?
They don't understand the power of leveraging. They don't understand the power of strategic positioning. The thing is, you need 21 votes to be able to pass a law by simple majority. The way things are going, it's a very closely divided political fray in Trinidad. 39 seats, 19, 18, thereabout, if my maths is correct. 2018, you need 21. The 2 Tobago seats come there. So nothing is going to be easily rubber stamped by a government without taking into consideration the 2 seats. And that is why, even with this administration, the 2 seats for central government were so critical. But if those 2 seats are not guaranteed, that gives the silent consent of Tobago automatically to the central government. But having seats that will truly call to heal the government in terms of Tobago's position, then those 2 seats are significant. It was the same 2 seats that Winston Murray and Dr. Robinson used to get the first Tobago House of Assembly Act. So if people understand the history, they would understand the power of these 2 Tobago seats to leverage and strategically have Tobago's issues discussed.
Now, I want to just start with some of the other issues that are very big in the space right now. And one of them has to do with sandals. Earlier this week, the IDA sent out a press release and saying that, Tobago, should not be treated as a child. And especially where the discussion of sandals and even some of the other promises that were made, particularly by Prime Minister Stuart Young, as to some of the deliverables that they are hoping to bring to Tobago in the next administration. So tell us a little bit about it, especially when it comes to dealing with sandals. What is the IDA's position? Explain not treating Tobago as a child a bit more.
We're at a stage where, if we look at the geopolitical landscape, our very survival as a nation, Trinidad and Tobago, is at the mercy of global powers like the US. And the degree of aggression they are exercising over small islands like ourselves, we cannot afford to at least stand up as an island and a nation, a unified nation, without truly looking at all the elements that we bring to the table as a nation and ensuring that we are strategically positioned to deal with it. That means Tobago cannot be seen or continue to be seen as a dependency to Trinidad. We must have a realignment and reorganizing of that relationship that is Trinidad and Tobago in the Union. Tobago can bring significant benefits to the Union, and it is time that both the political arrangement, the governance arrangement, and the economic arrangement is done so that that can happen. And that's why we're championing a new Tobago bill, one that includes the community rights bill that gives communities the right to develop their spaces, includes the Tobago population. No longer is it sufficient for politicians to say to the population, y'all take it easy, we gonna do the work. That perpetuates the dependency that a lot of people have been complaining about. It is time. We always like to use the phrase, all hands on deck. How is that going to be possible if we don't set up the framework to do that? So then the whole sandals issue is not about sandals per se. That is just a warning signal to us that if we are to develop Tobago, we have to look at more than just the type of tourism that we have been practicing all the time. The sea, sun, and sand tourism doesn't cut it. And we see that in the Caribbean. Jamaica, who we like to say has so many visitors coming to it, over 2.15 million, yet Jamaica only has a GDP per capita of 5,000, I think, 300 US dollars.
Now, there was also a statement made by the IDA when it comes to it's time to break free from that oil and gas dependency and so on. How do you view using your positions as MPs to make a difference in the way Tobago can position itself to help the country move away from that oil and gas dependency?
Diversification, diversification, diversification. We have been hearing that word for years, for decades, but yet there has been no move towards that because we have drunken ourselves on the oil and gas possibilities. We have so ingrained ourselves that we fail to realize that in 2025, we can no longer follow the pattern of extracting more oil and gas, exporting more oil and gas, and hoping for price increases. So we come into a windfall. We must deliberately, while we have oil and gas, yes, we take advantage of it, but during these times, we should also look at the other elements that Trinidad and Tobago has as assets that we can utilize. And from Tobago's point of view, tourism can provide that. But we need to look at the type of tourism we need to pursue.
And what type of tourism?
And that is the tourism that allows for longer stay in the island and that also takes advantage of what we like to call the production of capital services using the tourism platform. For example, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Cayman Islands, they use their tourism platform to provide and export capital services like medical tourism, healthcare, education, financial services. St. Kitts and Nevis, who are smaller than Tobago, they have been able to create development within their islands by using the tourism platform, yes, but by focusing on things, developing things like healthcare, education, long stay housing, so much so that their per capita GDP is, I think, 21,000 US dollar per person. No oil and gas. So the first thing that Tobago has to do is decide what type of tourism would allow us to fully take advantage of our assets that we have.
And then, okay, as you're speaking about that, there is messaging coming in from the THA as to how they want to shape the development of Tobago. And this is also in terms of making sure the THA in its current format can realize some of its powers in terms of town and country and that sort of thing that was taken away from Tobago and put in Trinidad. And of course, these things are needed so that things like what you're talking about in terms of tourism developments can happen. How do you intend to use your position as an MP to be able to at least help the THA in realizing these things and gaining back some of that power? Or do you disagree with that notion? Just give us a perspective where that's concerned.
Well, really, these two seats that are MP seats needs to work with our THA. Definitely needs to work with our THA. And the kind of synergy that needs to exist is to ensure that the THA really does have the protection and the access to the resources it needs to be able to execute those items that are under the fifth schedule. So it is not the role of MPs, and I will not, myself and my colleague, will not pursue roles that are competing with the THA. It's a relationship where we ensure from the national level what can be done to ensure the THA gets the protection, the lawmaking that is necessary for it to do its job in terms of under the fifth schedule. But it also creates the avenue for us to work, finally, the MP and the THA working together where that autonomy bill is concerned. And that a new autonomy bill needs to be put on the table. One that is led by the THA, yes, but one that has the MPs working with it so that we can go back to the Tobago population. I know people, this is a kind of sore topic for people. It has been done for so long, why we don't press ahead with it. But as I said, if we look at the geopolitical environment, it has changed so much that that bill that was debated, that was rejected, is flawed in its makeup because it didn't give power to the communities, especially in this day and age. So that we will work with the THA to champion a new Tobago bill, one that has ingrained in it the community rights bill that gives authority to communities to develop their spaces, and at the same time hoping to get that before the Parliament in an 18-month period for them to deliberate on. If they choose to ignore us then between the THA, we will work with the THA to mobilize politically as well as legally to get that addressed. So it's now not a piecemeal situation, and especially a situation that is divided because your MPs are attached to central government. It will now be a very focused Tobago first agenda where that is concerned.
And you know, when other things are, when you're looking at some other things that are facing the Tobago space, the Land License Act, whether it is to allow for foreign direct investment, has been a bugbearer. I mean, it's something that since 2011, since 2012, the business community has been sort of advocating for. And I know you've been part of some of that advocation. Would you be, as an MP, would this be one of the things on your agenda?
It would be one of the things on the agenda because it's one of the things on the THA's agenda in response to the business community. But it also has to be pursued, not just with the efforts of the business community and where they stand, but also with the rest of the Tobago population. So that is why the Community Bill of Rights is so important, because the average citizen on the ground needs to be brought into the fray too, because that land license also affected them. So it's not just the business community. So that in this case, that will be pursued, yes, but with the entire Tobago population, not just the business community, all stakeholders across the board. And I think that is what we have been missing, because we always have certain factions from within the space pursuing an effort, and the efforts they pursue may be to their benefit, but not necessarily to other sections within the Tobago space's benefit.
Now, another thing that sort of kind of fell by the wayside these past few years, especially with the development of the autonomy bill, going to Parliament and COVID and all these things, and that is the settling the land deed situation here in Tobago. Now, we know that continues decades, it spans generations, and we have not gotten that sorted yet. What is the IDA's position where that is concerned? How do you plan to approach it? What's the strategy in bringing some relief to so many Tobago families that continue to struggle with this matter?
Well, that is part of a bigger issue that would involve the THA as well. And therefore, the 2 Tobago seats is not the only leverage that can be used there. You would also need, and I dare want to be very forward, an IDA-led THA. And that working together, yes, I would not miss that opportunity. And that working together, you have put in forth a Tobago Housing Trust that provides elements that would deal with not just providing housing, but addressing the land tenure issues in ways that can bring relief to that. You would have a portion that is dealt with how do you bring resolution to those long-standing family disputes, that you can now have that asset to be monetized into building houses for the family members or across the board Tobagonians that find themselves without housing. So that is a bigger issue that would require not just the MPs on one hand dealing with lawmaking that may address that and policies that may address that, but also the THA in terms of the implementation and actual projects that can realize it down at the lower level. But that can be addressed through a housing trust initiative.
All right. Now, I mean, we've had a lot to get through. And we're going to have you back, of course, as we get closer to April 28th to get more into some of these details that are so important, because as we get closer to the election date, we also have to make sure that the public understands the role of an MP and how
Yes.
it differs from the role of a THA representative and so on, and make sure that the issues that we are discussing are related to the correct form of government. Right?
Precisely. So if I could synopsize that, the role of an MP and my colleague and myself would be towards shaping laws, making national laws, and bearing in mind how those laws impact on Tobago. It would be towards helping to shape the budget, ensuring that Tobago gets its rightful amount, rightful fair share of equity in that. And it's also towards unbiased oversight, bringing accountability, holding the central government and the cabinet especially accountable for its actions.
All right, great. And thank you so much, Ms. Trotman, for being on with you, viewers. This is your candidate, the IDA candidate for the Tobago West seat. You heard from her yourself, so you can, make your own decision as to what you are going to choose on April 28th. And of course, you know that Tobago Updates is going to be going very deep into every single candidate that has put themselves forward. We didn't get started. We didn't even talk about the fact that there's 9 people contesting Tobago West seat. But as you heard, Ms. Trotman, she knows what she's doing. And so I want to thank you again. And viewers, thank you for viewing. And we will see you again tomorrow.